The Young and the Restless spoilers. Clare Newman stands at the epicenter of Genoa City's most dramatic family sagas, yet she moves through its corridors with a humility that is almost unheard of in Newman Enterprises' hallowed halls. From her careful diplomacy when confronted by Victor's disapproval to her willingness to pause her own dreams for the sake of reflection, Clare has never demanded the spotlight. She has earned it through quiet integrity and genuine compassion. In stark contrast, Diane Jenkins has become synonymous with me in The Young and the Restless. No matter how much Diane claims to have endured, she always seems to turn every crisis into another chapter in her personal odyssey. One name soaks up the attention by defying expectations and forging her own path, the other seeks to command every narrative twist for her own benefit. What, then, creates this gulf between Clare's unassuming strength and Diane's relentless self-centeredness? To answer that, we must examine the very essence of both women, their motivations, and the ways in which they navigate love, loyalty, and legacy in a town where every secret is currency and every relationship is a bargaining chip. The heart of the matter, humble resolve versus audacious self-promotion. Clare Newman's defining trait is her refusal to leverage her family name for power. When she first emerged as Victor and Nikki's granddaughter, she could have coasted on her lineage. Instead, she chose to build alliances on her own merits, supporting charity fundraisers at Crimson Lights, offering genuine counsel to friends in crisis, and forging a burgeoning relationship with Kyle Abbott purely on mutual respect. Clare's request to Victor, that she be allowed to move in with Kyle, was not a demand for dominion over Genoa City, it was a heartfelt plea for his blessing on the next chapter of her life. Diane Jenkins, by contrast, clamors for recognition in every interaction. Where Clare listened patiently to Victor's reservations and chose to step back, Diane storms into conversations with an air of entitlement. No matter how many weddings she has survived, married to Jack Abbott, to Colin Atkinson, and no matter how many corporate boardrooms she has entered, Diane never quite relinquishes her starring role. Every whisper between Genoa City's power players becomes, in her retelling, proof that the world revolves around her grievances and desires. The difference is not merely in the volume of their voices, but in the quality of their intentions. Clare seeks harmony, Diane demands center stage. Loyalty tested. When family ties fray, the divergence between Clare and Diane becomes most striking when family crises strike. For Clare, the rift with Victor over her living arrangements was painful but navigated with grace. She returned home, not in anger, but in sorrow. Needing time, as she confessed, to ensure that love for Kyle was more than a challenge to tradition. Clare's pain lay in the fracture of her bond with Victor, a wound she treated with introspection before defiance. Diane's loyalty, however, is notoriously conditional. When Tracy Abbott found herself torn between two dangerous brothers, Alan and his evil twin, Martin Laurent, Diane leapt forward with reassurance. She spoke at length about her own quest for acceptance within the Abbott clan, lamenting that no matter how many apologies she offered, she would never truly be one of them. Yet Diane's empathy rang hollow when pressed for specifics. Tracy, traumatized by Martin's threats and Alan's confusion over his identity, confided only in Jack Abbott. Diane insisted she understood Tracy's pain. But her steely insistence on making everything about her own redemption betrayed a worldview in which Tracy's suffering was but a backdrop to Diane's narrative of self-forgiveness. The Tracy Abbott conundrum. When comfort becomes pressure, Tracy's engagement to the real Alan Abbott, while Martin masqueraded in his brother's life, plunged her into psychological terror. Fearing the man she loved had become a stranger, Tracy retreated into secrecy, choosing to confide only in her brother Jack. Diane, eager to play the supportive friend, bombarded Tracy with assurances. "You're safe with me," she would coo. "I understand what it means to feel trapped by blood and betrayal." Yet as the details of Tracy's ordeal surfaced, Diane's soliloquies on her own quest for Abbott acceptance grew tiresome, so much so that Tracy ceased to reveal any new details, fearing Diane would spin them into fodder for her own victim-turned-victor storyline. In contrast, Clare would never use a friend's trauma to bolster her own profile. When her own family squabbles erupted, Clare turned inward, held her confidence with Victor close to her vest, and sought out only those she trusted most: Kyle, Nikki, or sometimes merely her own journal. She understands that true compassion is a quiet offering, not a platform for self-aggrandizement. 4. Forging alliances, patience versus entitlement. Another key difference emerges when we look at how Clare and Diane pursue relationships. Clare approached Kyle with patience, showing him that her love was unwavering even when Victor withheld his blessing. She recognized that moving in together was not a stunt, but a step that required thoughtful deliberation. Her decision to delay, to carefully consider her heart and her family ties, demonstrated maturity beyond her years, and a deep understanding that love thrives on trust, not pressure. Diane, on the other hand, has pursued alliances with the gusto of a high-stakes corporate raider. She once partnered with J.T. Hellstrom to protect her from Jack's wrath. She later joined forces with Colin Atkinson to reclaim her house. She orchestrated business deals with Victor himself when it suited her interests. Yet each of these partnerships was fleeting, undermined by Diane's own insistence that the terms be restructured to her advantage. Where Clare exemplifies partnership built on equality, Diane embodies the transactional alliance: you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, until I demand a bigger favor. The legacy question, inherited power versus earned respect. Ultimately, the gulf between Clare and Diane can be distilled into a single idea: legacy. Clare respects her inheritance but refuses to rest on her family's laurels. She channels Newman Enterprises' philanthropic initiatives, supports Victor during crises, and defers to the gravitas of her elders, yet she also carves out her own identity, championing causes and relationships not because they are glamorous, but because they mean something to her. Diane views legacy as a birthright that entitles her to center stage. She has chased every member of the Abbott and Newman dynasties, often claiming that nearly every setback in her life was the result of family betrayal rather than her own choices. Rather than earning respect through action, Diane seems to believe that respect is owed to her due to her entanglement in Genoa City's biggest sagas. She touches every narrative thread, and insists that the tapestry of every storyline revolve around her. 6. Lessons in character. Why we root for Clare, and why we shake our heads at Diane. For viewers, Clare and Diane offer two very different models of womanhood in a world that often rewards brash ambition and punishes quiet dignity. Clare's triumph of humility. She shows us that being at the center of one's own story does not require drowning out others. By listening, by caring, and by making space for reflection, Clare has built relationships that endure. Her greatest victories are not boardroom maneuvers, but moments of compassion, steering her grandfather back from the brink, supporting a friend in crisis, or carefully weighing her heart's desires before leaping. Diane's cautionary tale of self-centeredness. In Diane, we see the perils of turning every crisis into a personal crusade. Her relentless focus on her own motives and her refusal to let others' needs eclipse her own ambitions demonstrate how attention-seeking can unravel marriages, alienate friends, and stall genuine healing. Diane's life is a whirlwind of schemes, each promising vindication but delivering only further isolation. 7. The path ahead. Can Diane ever transform, and will Clare's caution carry her through? As the young and the restless hurtles toward its next sweeps period, Genoa City's viewers will watch Clare and Diane's arcs unfold in parallel, one rising, one circling ever closer to self-destruction. Clare faces new tests of her resolve when secret plotlines, perhaps involving Phyllis's latest intel on Abbott Communications, threaten to entangle Kyle's family and force her back into the fray of corporate warfare. Yet her demonstrated maturity suggests she will navigate those storms with the same thoughtful care she's shown in her personal life. For Diane, the question remains whether she can transcend her patterns of self-absorption. Will Tracy Abbott's refusal to open up become the moment Diane finally recognizes that not all stories are hers to rewrite? Or will she persist in demanding attention until every ally becomes an adversary? One thing is certain: Genoa City needs more Clare Newmans. Individuals who accept the spotlight as a privilege, not a given, and fewer Diane Jenkinses, whose hunger for attention can consume the very relationships they claim to cherish. In a world where everyone scrambles for power, Clare reminds us that integrity, empathy, and a willingness to pause before acting can be the greatest sources of strength. As you tune in this week, ask yourself, who do you stand with? The granddaughter who walks on water without demanding applause, or the returning daughter whose cry of me drowns out all others? In the end, the heart that listens may be the one that wins everything that truly matters. In the gilded halls of the Abbott estate, where generational wealth and legacy intertwine like vines in an ancient vineyard, one figure has reasserted herself with all the subtlety of a thunderclap, Diane Jenkins. Fresh from her reintegration gala, complete with champagne towers, a live string quartet, and centerpieces so grand they felt like miniature cathedrals, Diane has declared her intention to reboot her place at the heart of Abbott family affairs. Nearly everyone from Victor to Tracy has rolled out the red carpet welcome mat. Everyone, that is, except for the one Abbott whose approval she might actually have valued most, Billy Abbott, the very son whose childhood home she has chosen to reoccupy. Billy's reaction was, in a word, underwhelming. When Diane approached him in the mahogany-paneled library, her voice all honeyed warmth and faux vulnerability, he offered nothing more than a polite but firm shrug. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Diane," he said, choosing his words with deliberate care, "but I'm not sure this reboot is my cup of tea." No dramatic hiss, no whispered conspiracy, just honesty. Billy, after all, has never thrived on pretense. He lives at the estate, day in and day out. He knows the creak of every floorboard, the echo of every guest's laughter. And he knows, better than anyone, when something feels off. Rather than accepting his candor as a gift, Diane stormed home to Jack, her husband, her confidant, her willing collaborator in every scheme, lamenting that her prodigal return had yielded exactly one dissenting opinion. Of all the Abbotts, she wailed between sips of her now stale Merlot, "The one who actually lives here is the only one who doesn't want me around." What kind of welcome is that? Jack, ever the steady anchor in Diane's tempestuous sea, reminded her that 99% approval is still 99% approval. But Diane, whose capacity for dramatis personae rivals even the most ambitious of soap opera heroines, would not be placated. From there, Diane's crusade evolved into something more insidious, a relentless campaign to insert herself into every Abbott decision, no matter how intimate or personal. She attended the executive briefing when Clare Newman nervously asked Victor for his blessing to move in with Kyle Abbott. She offered unsolicited counsel on the ethics of cohabitation, citing Victor's concerns while conveniently blowing her own trumpet about independence and personal strength. She leaned in when Tracy Abbott hesitated over the twin-twisted drama with Alan and Martin Laurent, whispering tales of her own forged path to acceptance within the clan. And now, with Clare's plans paused and Diane's meddling in full swing, the question on everyone's mind is, will Diane ever learn to stay in her own lane, or is she destined to be the Abbott family's perpetual intruder? To understand Diane's compulsion, we must trace her history with the Abbotts. A tapestry woven with heartbreak, ambition, and more than a few hostile boardroom takeovers. Diane first arrived in Genoa City as an outsider, a woman on the run from a past that included a mobile prostitution ring and a series of ill-fated romances. When she married Jack Abbott, she tasted the heady elixir of power, the respect that comes from the Abbott name, the privileges that accompany wealth, the unspoken deference from a family both awed and wary of her. But when that marriage crumbled, amid whispers of betrayal and secret affairs, Diane's reintegration became a lifelong quest to recapture what she felt was rightfully hers. Every apology speech, every dramatic confrontation, every contrived moment of vulnerability was a bid to reclaim a spotlight she believed the Abbotts owed her. Contrast that with Clare Newman, the quietly resilient granddaughter of Victor and Nikki. Clare has never demanded the stage, she has stepped onto it with purpose and integrity. When Victor withheld his blessing for her move to Kyle's loft, Clare did not storm out in a blaze of self-pity. She paused, respecting her grandfather's wishes enough to give herself time to reflect. When the world expects her to behave like some entitled heiress, she delivers compassion instead, volunteering at Genoa City's women's shelter, mediating sibling skirmishes at the Newman Physiatrics Clinic, and lending an ear to friends enduring crises. Claire's star burns bright not because she insists on attention, but because she earns it through empathy, level-headedness, and the rare ability to listen without judgment. Diane, by contrast, seems incapable of a conversation that does not revolve around herself. When Tracy confided in Jack about the terror of nearly marrying a man who turned out to be his psychotic twin, Diane was quick to declare, "I know what it feels like to have your identity stolen." Yet few believed her stories of trauma because Diane's version always sounded rehearsed, an actress auditioning for the leading role in her own tragedy. Tracy, craving a safe space, chose to confide in Jack and a handful of trusted friends. In the end, Diane's compulsive need to share, her insistence on weaving every tragedy into her grand narrative, drove Tracy away. Now Diane has cast her alluring net over Claire's relationship with Kyle. Claire, fresh from the emotional gauntlet of Victor's refusal, sought solace in the only place she thought she could find it, Kyle's carefully curated loft, where the skyline view from the balcony felt like an open invitation to a new life. Diane intercepted Claire on her way out the door, arms folded in disapproval. "You're rushing into this," she warned, tapping an imperious finger against her glossy teacup. "You deserve more than a half-blessing from your grandfather. Think about what this means for your own family's legacy." Setting aside the fact that Victor's concerns were grounded in decades of inter-family feuds and corporate chess games, Diane's intrusion was a stark reminder of the difference between offering genuine advice and wielding unsolicited judgment as a weapon. Claire, patient yet firm, paused at the threshold and said simply, "Thank you, Diane, but I'll make this decision in my own time." Then she closed the door, leaving Diane to simmer in her own frustration. What makes this moment so striking, and so instructive, is the contrast between Claire's measured independence and Diane's desperate clinginess. Claire's approach to love and to family is rooted in trust, trust that Victor's wisdom may guide her, but not define her, trust that Kyle's love will endure even if obstacles arise, and trust in her own heart to know when a pause is not a retreat, but a strategic repositioning. Diane's approach, by contrast, is rooted in scarcity, the belief that there is only one spotlight and that every time someone else steps beneath it, she must claw her way back into view. From a narrative standpoint, Diane's self-absorption creates an irresistible foil to Claire's quiet heroism, and that is precisely why viewers remain captivated. We cheer for Claire because she exemplifies the virtues we wish we had. Patience in the face of disappointment, humility in the face of privilege, and empathy in the face of conflict. We cringe at Diane because she magnifies our own worst desires, the need to be always right, to be endlessly admired, and to be the center of every story. In the end, the Abbott estate will continue to spin its web of power plays, betrayals, and alliances, but only those who master the delicate art of listening will thrive. Diane, for all her strategic brilliance and charisma, risks becoming a cautionary tale, a reminder that influence without humility becomes a tyrant's weapon, and ambition without empathy breeds isolation. Claire, by embracing her role without demanding it, demonstrates that true leadership is not about commanding the stage, but about lifting others so that everyone may shine. As Genoa City prepares for the next wave of boardroom battles and cliffhangers, one thing is certain. The estate's grand halls echo not only with the tread of polished shoes, but with the choices of those who walk them. Will Diane learn that belonging is not won by taking center stage, but by making space for others? Or will she remain trapped in her own drama, forever banging at doors she refuses to open from the inside? Meanwhile, Claire stands poised to remind us all that sometimes, the most powerful voices are those heard in the quiet of a heart truly at peace. And so, under the chandeliers and between the marble columns, the true question emerges, whose story will resonate through the years, the one who demands applause, or the one whose gentle courage inspires it? In the world of the young and the restless, Where every secret is a ticking time bomb and every alliance a fragile truce, the answer may lie not in who shouts the loudest, but in who dares to listen first.